The house that held us. The smell of rain hitting hot asphalt always snaps me straight back to that golden, heavy summer. That was the year our house felt clogged with a silence that wasn't really quiet. It was the hush of Grandpa's old leather chair, still shaped like him, empty but somehow full. It was the half-finished crossword abandoned at 7 down, the pen just lying there waiting for someone who wouldn't come back. And it was the sharp, brittle quiet after my mom spoke, her words all practical and clipped, trying to wrestle grief into something tidy. "Pack up, Mom," she told Grandma, her voice rough from weeks of late-night phone calls, casseroles, and no sleep. We were all stuck in Grandma's kitchen, the beating heart of the house Grandpa built 50 years ago. Sunlight poured through those checkered curtains, catching the dust that just hovered in the air, refusing to settle. You could still catch a trace of his cherry pipe smoke and that lemon polish Grandma used every Saturday, no matter what. "You can't stay here alone. The market's good right now. We'll sell, you'll move in with us, and that's one less thing to worry about." Grandma didn't argue. She looked so small, hunched in her faded floral housecoat, almost disappearing into it. She just stared out the kitchen window at the wild tangle of tomatoes and stubborn marigolds out back. Her hands were wrapped tight around her world's best grandma mug, knuckles gone pale. My dad, who hardly ever needed words, stood by the door, taking up most of the frame. He cleared his throat, deep and steady, the kind of sound that means he's about to plant his feet and not budge. "Lynn," he said to my mom, voice low and even, every syllable heavy. "This house was never yours to sell." Mom whipped around, waving that stack of estate papers. Her eyes, same pale blue as Grandma's, were tired but fierce. "What are you talking about, Mike? It's Mom's house. It's an asset. It's common sense. It's a 3-bedroom with an old roof and a damp basement. It's responsibility." Dad stepped all the way into the kitchen, leaving smudgy boot prints behind him. He didn't look at Mom. He looked at Grandma, as if he needed her say-so. Then he put his big, rough hand, 30 years of machine shop in those calluses, over her small, clenched one. "This house," he said, his voice suddenly gentle, like flannel, "was never just an asset, Lynn. The floorboards remember the exact squeak of Dad's chair. There's the window over the sink where your mom sat every night, waiting for his headlights. So many years the glass probably learned her shape by heart. And look at the hallway wall. Your height marks are still there from every birthday before college. Pencil lines telling your story. You can't just sell that. You don't." A single tear slid down Grandma's wrinkled cheek. She let it go, didn't bother to wipe it away. That was the first crack. Finally, something gave. There wasn't any big speech after that, no dramatic family meeting, just a quiet, steady campaign of being there, a slow, stubborn stitching together. Next Saturday, Dad pulled up at Grandma's at 7 sharp. I went too, half awake, the world still blurry with early morning. Dad didn't bother the doorbell. He headed straight for the garage, dark and cluttered, thick with the smell of gas and old wood. He dug around fishing rods and boxes of tangled Christmas lights until he found Grandpa's battered old push mower, the kind that needs muscle, not gasoline. He started mowing, and the swish, swish, thwack of the blades through the tall grass turned into this steady, peaceful rhythm in the cool morning. An hour later, the sun higher and sweat streaking his shirt, the screen door creaked open. Grandma stepped out with 2 glasses of iced tea, the condensation slipping down the sides. She handed Dad a glass, their fingers brushing for a second. She didn't say thank you. She just said, "Your father always started on the north side so the clippings wouldn't blow onto Mrs. Henderson's roses. He said it was the right thing to do." That Thursday, Mom showed up after work. Her sleep briefcase looked out of place on Grandma's old wool rug. She brought 2 bags of groceries, kicked off her heels, tied on one of Grandma's silly aprons, the kind that says, "Kiss the cook," and started digging out pots and pans. The kitchen filled up with familiar sounds, the clang of a lid, the hiss of butter, the quick chop 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 of onions. The noise chased out the silence. I got handed a pile of carrots to peel at the old Formica table, the one with the chipped corner where I dropped a soup can as a kid. Grandma moved slow, like she was wading through deep water, but she started stirring a pot of gravy, her motions picking up a little confidence as she went. "He always liked extra black pepper in this," she said, barely above a whisper, talking more to the gravy than to any of us. "Said it gave it backbone." "I know, Mom," my mother answered. This time her voice wasn't sharp or tired from work. It just sounded young, worn out, and completely sad. She reached into the cabinet and grabbed the pepper tin without even looking. That night, the 3 of us ate at the kitchen table. Pot roast, carrots, mashed potatoes, nothing fancy, just food. But passing around the heavy glass salt shaker, the one always filled way too full, across the empty seat where Grandpa belonged, felt almost holy. It was our small, daily protest against the emptiness. From there, things just sort of grew, like ivy creeping up a wall. I started dropping my history homework in the living room, sprawling on the rough wool rug while Grandma watched her game shows. The TV's tinny clapping and shouting turned into background noise while I read about fallen empires. Then my brother Leo, who usually just grunts and rolls his eyes, showed up one afternoon, smelling like cut grass and teenage attitude. He spotted the gutter hanging loose on the back porch. Without a word, he dragged out Grandpa's old paint-splattered stepladder from the garage. He banged around with the hammer, smacked his thumb, swore under his breath. Grandma stood below, gripping the ladder, her hands steady, her face turned up to him in the dappled light, watching like he was the most important crossword clue in the world. One rainy afternoon, the kind where the sound of drops turns the whole house into a drum, I found Mom, not in her usual spots, but tucked away up in the attic. She wasn't organizing or packing or even looking for anything. She just sat cross-legged on the dusty floor, photos spilling out of an old shoebox, scattered all around her like leaves after a storm. I sat down next to her. The attic wood felt surprisingly warm. We sifted through the pictures together, Grandpa grinning, impossibly young, holding baby Mom by the blurry ocean. Grandpa with his arm around Grandma at their 25th anniversary, both of them looking like movie stars in clothes that had definitely seen better decades. There was one of him teaching me, gap-toothed and tiny, how to swing a wiffle ball bat, his big hand wrapped around mine. We didn't say much. We just took turns passing the fragile, curling photos back and forth, holding the past right there in our hands, letting it warm us. Mom rubbed her thumb along the edge of a picture and whispered, "I forgot he had this shirt." And she smiled, a real one, the first I'd seen in what felt like forever. Time rolled on, slow and strange. The house started to shift, almost without us noticing. It stopped feeling like a museum, frozen in time. Instead, it became a place where we tried, bit by bit, to reclaim something. Dad and I spent a whole weekend painting the old garden shed a wild, bright sunflower yellow. Mom and Grandma, sun hats flapping, planted a riot of marigolds and petunias along the walkway, a burst of color Grandpa would have called too much, but Grandma smiled every time she saw them. And then the big step, the first Sunday dinner. Mom called with this voice that was both nervous and determined. "We're coming over," she said. "All of us. I'll cook the chicken." Not just any chicken, the buttermilk brined, rosemary roasted one Grandpa always wanted for his birthday, the one that meant celebration, even if just because it filled the house with that rich, familiar smell. That Sunday, the house came alive again. Too many dishes clattered in the kitchen, Leo's awful music thumped through his headphones, the old oven rattled and groaned, and the dog crashed into a wall chasing its tail, sending everyone into fits of laughter. Dad, at Grandma's urging, carved the chicken at the head of the table, his hands steady and sure. We passed around bowls of green beans, almondine, and pillowy rolls, bumping elbows and crowding together in that warm, cramped, perfect space. There was a moment, as we all started to eat, where the missing piece felt huge, a presence you couldn't see but still there, the empty chair, the unspoken punchline, the spot where Grandpa's laugh should have rumbled out. We all felt it, holding our breaths a second too long. Then Grandma took a bite of chicken. She chewed, thinking. Finally, she looked up, her eyes brighter than I'd seen in months, and found my mom's across the table. "You got the seasoning just right," she said. "The rosemary, not too much, just how he liked it." Mom's eyes shone instantly, bright in the kitchen light, but she didn't look away. She didn't crumble. She just gave a little nod, quick and grateful. It was more than approval. It was her way of saying, "You did it. We're still here." Dad reached out and covered Grandma's hand, just like he did that first hard day. Then he stretched his other hand to Mom. She looked at him for a second, then took it, lacing her fingers through his. I reached for Leo's hand across the table, sticky from soda, of course, but he rolled his eyes and squeezed my fingers hard. I found Grandma's hand with my other, cool and small but strong. We sat like that, a messy, unbreakable chain around our old, scratched-up table. We weren't trying to erase Grandpa or patch over the empty spaces. We were building something new on top of what he left us, a new floor, so to speak, where you could still hear his footsteps creak on the stairs, but now our own footsteps joined in. The house hadn't been sold or signed away. It belonged to us now, stitched together by all the small repairs and shared moments, by breath and laughter and hard work. It wasn't just Grandpa's house or Grandma's. It was ours, our anchor, our living story about what comes next. A family figuring out, in the quietest possible ways, with peeled carrots, patched gutters, and a perfectly seasoned roast chicken, how to hold on to each other and to every memory that matters. One meal, one moment, one stubborn, hopeful act at a time.